Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ben, and this is my beloved 2003 SG Voodoo. Let's get into it. So I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I never had any intention of doing a deep dive on a guitar that I've owned for 22 years now. But two things happened. The first is every time this guitar makes an appearance in any of my videos, I'm flooded with comments like, wow, what a cool guitar. Oh, I love the SG Voodoo. Ooh, let's talk about that guitar. And number two, I requested a sample of a product that requires some very worn out frets to use, and this kind of fits the bill. So I could hit two birds with one stone, as they say. What I think is pretty cool is there's a lot of you out there, a lot of collectors perhaps, that are really interested in Gibson's one-off guitars and their strange offerings than the stuff that they're more commonly known for. I didn't realize at the time that this was one of those strange guitars, but this came out during a weird era for Gibson when they had things like the Menace line, the Gothic line, the Voodoo line, the Smartwood series. It seemed like they were always releasing some weird type of guitar for a year or two, and I don't know if they were expecting one of them to just take off or if they were always intended to be limited releases. Well, this guitar definitely fits that bill, but the reason I ended up with it was not for any of those reasons. It wasn't until years and years later that I realized how unique this guitar really was. The truth is I was looking for a Gibson Les Paul, and they were way out of my price budget, but this thing kind of fit the bill. I got it brand new, I think, for $900, and it fit this interest-free payment plan that American Musical was doing. I do want to point out that my review is for the first run of the Voodoo guitars like this one, and that was like a 2 or 3 year run that started in 2002 and went to 2004 or 5, something like that. But there's a second run of Voodoo guitars from Gibson that came out in 2019, and those were exclusively with Zounds and American Musical supply. This guitar is completely different from those guitars, so anything you learn in this video probably does not apply to that guitar. In 2003, I bought this guitar brand new for about $900, but I think on the used market today, you could probably get somewhere between $1,500 and maybe $2,250, depending on the shape of the guitar, if it has all the original parts, the original case especially. My guitar, well, you have to understand, I played this thing every day for about 15 years. I had two guitars that worked at the time, a Takamine acoustic and this SG Voodoo. I lived in an apartment, so basically, I would plug it into an amp, plug my headphones into an amp, and just jam around for hours at a time. So I would definitely consider mine player grade. You can see that the finish on the neck is worn all the way through there. There's a lot of wear right here where your strumming is at the waist. There's a few nicks and scratches, but overall it's actually in really good shape. The headstock looks great. There's no chips or dents or bumps, anything like that. But still, I don't know, $1,500, maybe $1,700 on the high end, on the very high end, which, you know, also depends on my case. But let's talk about that. Now, for some people, the case was the best part of the Voodoo series of guitars. American Musical Supply describes it as a simulated python skin. I think imitation python skin might be a better way to put it. But you can see it's pretty cool here. It's got this red, black snake skin look to it. On the front here, we've got a red bordered Gibson USA logo. Pretty cool. Inside is a nice plush black padding. And then there's the usual pocket. Now, this was back when Gibson had TKL making their cases. Inside the pocket, well, let's see what's left in there. I'm pretty sure this is all that came with it. We've got the Gibson Gold Warranty card. Remember, only a Gibson is good enough. Then we've got the guitar checklist. We've got a guitar owner's manual, and there it is, the truss rod adjustment tool. I'm not sure if this guitar ever came with a strap and I lost it, or if this is all that was in there. Of course, my latch is busted here. Otherwise, everything's in decent shape considering it's 22 years old. One of the more interesting looks for an SG, and I'm not just talking about the color palette itself, but the actual tactile feel of the body. It might be a little bit difficult to see here, but each one of these grain striations that you see in the back, you can feel it. I don't really understand the process behind that, because I imagine if you took a slab of wood and you planed it or sanded it down to be this flat piece of wood for a guitar, it should all be flat. So I don't know why the grains have indentations in them. I can't conceive it. I don't know. It doesn't make sense in my mind. But the way that I understand it is they sprayed the guitar ebony, and then once that dried, they took a red grain filler, wiped it on, filled in all these gaps that you see on the front and the back and the sides even, and then they wiped it off, and every area that was perfectly flat, went back to the ebony finish, and then all the grains were filled in with this red. That's the way I understand it, but if you guys know more about this process, please enlighten me, because I think it's one of the coolest finishes that Gibson's ever put on one of their guitars, to be honest with you. And then going back to the look of this guitar, and really the Voodoo series in general, well, I think something everybody knows is that there's a lot of red-black pairing going on here, right? Like the pickups, you've got the red-black bobbins, you've got the black top hat knobs with the red lettering, you've got the black poker chip with the red lettering on that as well. Then you've got the little red logo at the 5th fret. I always called it Scully. That's what I thought he was called, like S-K-U-L-L-Y, but maybe that was some of my X-Files obsession bleeding into my Gibson obsession, who knows. And then you've also got your red Gibson logo at the top there. And I don't know if you can see this, but the serial number there is also that red grain filled thing, which is a pretty cool look. What's very unique about this guitar is Gibson went away with the traditional mahogany body on an SG, and this is actually swamp ash for the Voodoo series. Even though they've used swamp ash every once in a while, they generally reserve it for very limited release guitars, of which I now know this is one of those. One of the more popular guitars that's known to use a swamp ash is some of Fender's blonde finish guitars, like their Telecasters and Stratocasters. In fact, there's a great write-up on swamp ash on the Fender website. I'll put a link for it in the description below. Specifically what it says is that swamp ash is incredibly difficult to work with. No two bodies ever have the same tonal properties, not compared to mahogany or alder, but it has a very porous finish that takes on certain finishes very well, which is why they use it for a lot of their blonde finishes. Additionally, they say it's a good balance between warmth and brightness, which makes it one of the most sought-after 1950s Fender guitars. Now in regards to the actual shape and carving of this SG in particular, well, this was definitely during one of the more boring eras of the SG guitars, if you ask me. It's more of like a SG special in the sense that it's pretty much flat, and some places do list this as a Voodoo SG special. But you can see, even though you've got your general horn shape here, when you look at them from the side, they're just pretty much flat horns to the body. Not really a lot of carving going on there. There's also minimal carving down here underneath the horn, and then on the back side, sure, you get a little bit of the traditional belly carve area, but it's very shallow in comparison to even today's modern SG standard. I do want to point out that this SG Voodoo in particular is a one-piece swamp ash body, which is really cool. I know Trogley did a write-up on his SG Voodoo, and I think he found it was either 2 or 3 pieces total to make his body, and I've seen other ones that were 2-piece as well, but yeah, I've looked at mine and it is just one solid slab, which I think is really cool. I always love a good one-piece body. Now, whenever I do any of my videos, I always clean up my guitars, give the fretboard a little bit of a polishing. Well, check out the fretboard on this guitar. Look at the frets on this thing. That is 22 years of grime. And this is a guitar that I take care of. So imagine when you buy a used guitar that's been sitting around somebody's house, neglected for decades. Well, enter FRTLZR. And the product I wanted to try out in particular from them was the fret polishing kit. What's great about this kit is it comes with everything you need. It comes with the gripper tool, several different stages of polishing grits, the big fat rubber band to attach the grits to the gripper tool, and lastly, in case you don't want to sit there and masking tape your entire fretboard, you can use the included fretboard protector. I'm going to take my heaviest grit first. In this case, it's a 400. I'm going to wrap it around my gripper tool using the big fat provided rubber band. I'm going to fit it into the 2 grooves on the side here. With the other hand, I'm going to take the fretboard protector and I'm going to hold it firmly over the fret. And using just the weight of the gripper with the paper, I'm going to rub it back and forth over the fret until I start to see it polishing up. And I'm going to repeat that process on each fret. And when that's done, I'm going to move to the next finest grit up. And then I'm going to repeat the process over and over until I get all the way through the finest of grits. And then when that's done, I'm going to take a cloth and just give those frets a little wipe to remove any excess material, and check out how beautiful these things look. FRTLZR will ship it internationally for about €3, which is around $3. I'll put a link for it below. So thanks again, FRTLZR, for sending this kit out for me to try. Now let's move on to the neck. So this guitar also has the usual Gibson mahogany neck, but what's really cool is they outfitted it with this ebony fretboard. Now, I just did a video on the Guild Polera Night Edition a few weeks ago, and that also had an ebony board, and I think it's the same reasoning behind this guitar. It's guaranteed to be a dark fretboard to match the general dark appearance of the guitar. So Gibson's official literature calls this a 50s rounded profile. Let's take some measurements and see. So at the nut here, we're getting a 1.68 inches as expected, but on the first fret, we get a 0.82. Moving down to the 12th fret, we get a 0.96. So I'd say, yeah, that puts it squarely in the rounded profile for sure. Just a little bit thicker than some of the heavier slim tapers, but it actually feels really good. And this is the neck, obviously, that I've grown up playing, so I'm very used to it. And then of course, this is a 12-inch radius as expected. And then if you're wondering about angle back from the neck, well, yeah, you get just about almost 4 degrees from the body to the neck angle back. And then to the headstock, you get almost a perfect 17-degree angle back from the neck, which puts it right on spec. Now starting at the bottom and working our way to the top, well, we've got the black strap buttons here, which are kind of dinky and I don't really trust them one bit. You've got the same one on the bottom as on the back side of the neck. So you might want to look into upgrading those if you ever get this guitar, or maybe using a locking strap. That's what I do. And then moving on from there, we get to the jack right here. And it's interesting that they didn't decide to put a black output jack on this. I don't know why, and I never will, unfortunately. Moving up from there, we get to the stop bar and the Tune-O-Matic bridge. These are both black chrome hardware pieces. This is before Gibson had revamped the Tune-O-Matic bridge. So this one, if you want to adjust the height, you have to do it with just the thumb wheels, as there are no hex key inserts if you wanted to put a wrench in there and get a little torque on it. Now moving up to the frets here, well, these aren't quite medium jumbo frets, but they're very close. They're just a tiny bit shorter, and I don't know if I would be able to tell if I wasn't using my tools to measure that. And moving up from there, we get to the truss rod, and you can see that this is actually a really nice looking truss rod. Yep, everything looks clean in there. And then moving up from there, we get to our tuners. And these are the kidney bean style tuners, which, as you guys know, are not my favorite. These ones are measuring in at a 14:1 tuning ratio, and they're all black, as you can see there, and they look pretty good. For the electronics, Gibson refers to these pickups as Gibson Blackmagic pickups, but really all it is a 500T and 496R ceramic pickup. The only difference, of course, is that you've got a red bobbin and a black bobbin. These are double slugged as opposed to having a screw for one side, but otherwise they read the exact same as any 500T 496R combo would. Now let's pop these out and look at the back. Nothing too crazy going on there. It looks like we've got the old style Gibson USA stamp, but otherwise it's completely devoid of any information. Cavity looks nice and clean though, so that's cool. Now the readings on these pickups, I get a 14.50 for the bridge and an 8.34 for the neck. In the middle position, I'm getting a 5.29. Gibson describes these pickups as an aggressively hot neck pickup paired with an extremely hot bridge pickup for ultimate sustain and definition. We'll see about that in the sound test. Now let's flip it over and look in the back cavity. Nothing too remarkable in there. It's a clean cavity utilizing a modern wiring scheme, no surprise. Got some cheapy ceramic caps in there. I like that somebody just Sharpied the assembly date, December 1st, 2003. I did try to take some readings on the pots here. It looks like the volume pots at the very least are reading about 300K, which is pretty standard for Gibson around the time. Now for other materials, we'll also start at the bottom and work our way up to the top, then flip the guitar over as needed. So the first thing we're going to notice here is we've got our black top hat knobs with the red numbering in there. Pretty cool look, matches the theme of the general guitar there. Then we move up to our poker chip, which is also black with the red lettering there. And then in the middle of that, we've got our black switch tip. And then up from there, we get our 1966 inspired SG Batwing pickguard there. This is a single black ply pickguard. Aesthetically, I actually like the way that it looks on SGs, but functionally, I just never liked how it kept the pickups at a different angle than what the strings are at. And I know there's little hacks to sort of figure that out and get them wedged in there to match, but it was never really that important to me, I guess. Next up from there, we get to our inlays, and yes, there are no inlays, except for right there on the 5th fret, you've got our little red celluloid skull there. On the sides here, we do get some side fret markers there, which is always helpful when you don't have any markers on the fretboard, if that's how you play. And then moving up from there, we get to our nut. I honestly had no idea what this was made out of, so I reached out to Gibson, who told me the nut on all the Voodoo series of guitars is molded plastic. Then moving on from there, we get to our black truss rod cover. It's blank and it's a single ply black. And then lastly, of course, we've got our silkscreen red Gibson logo there, which is pretty cool on this guitar. Flip the guitar over, we've got our cavity cover, single ply black, nothing too crazy going on there. Well, the feel of this guitar for me is accomplishment, but that's because I learned how to play on it. But if we're talking strictly from an ergonomic point of view, well, when you're playing and you're sitting, your knee is going to be underneath the bridge pickup there, which is of course a little bit over from what maybe a Stratocaster or Les Paul would be, right? I do like the feel of this neck, but it's really hard to remember what it used to feel like. I mean, check it out. That's 22 years of playing right there. There's no Murphy Lab on this thing. That's the Bend Lab right there. I mean, this guitar's probably got thousands of hours of me playing on it. I'm surprised that this is a rounded C neck. It does feel a little bit thinner, like maybe more like a really fat, slim taper neck, but to me it feels great. Now, if you want to talk more about physical attributes, well, let's talk about the weight of this guitar. This thing weighs in at 7.07 pounds, which, if it's not the lightest guitar I've measured to date, it's got to be the lightest SG for sure. And then lastly, let's talk about neck dive, because that's a problem that every single SG has, right? This is a normal 2-inch couch guitar strap, which I think pretty much represents what almost everybody has at home, right? All right, let's see. I'll do the wobble. Well, I'd give it a B- C+ on the neck dive test, only because you could see it had a tendency to want to start to do this, but most people aren't wobbling back and forth like an idiot like I was just doing. But also, I imagine that's because the body's a little bit lighter and you have a slightly bigger, heavier headstock here. Next, we'll talk about the sound, and we'll see just how aggressive these ceramic pickups are, and we'll see if we can get some nice tones out of them as well. I'll dial up the volume and tone as necessary, as well as play with the bridge and the neck position, and whatever settings I pick there, I'll always put them on the side of the screen there so you can see exactly what I'm playing them at. I'll do some clean sounds and some dirt, and we'll just go from there. Well, there you have it. That's my review of my 2003 SG Voodoo guitar that I love so much. I do think that the pickups are a lot nicer than just what the papers say about them. They're super aggressive ceramic pickups. I do think, yes, they can be aggressive, but when you dial back some of the knobs here, the volume and the tone, you can get some really unique qualities out of them. And I do have to say, I think the 496R in the neck is a truly unique pickup because it has that brightness that's associated with some ceramic pickups, but just its general positioning on the guitar, it has just a very unique sound. But let me know what you guys think in the comments, and if I have anything relevant to say, I always respond to those. If you like the video, consider clicking the like button, and if you like more content that's generally like this, maybe consider subscribing. All right, guys, next time.